Hi, everybody. Welcome to my social justice discourse media podcasting. My name is Amanda Packard, and first, what I want to do is give you a brief summary of the three required definitions, and then I will move on to how I obtained those definitions and my observation of the procurement. After the definition, I will give you an analysis of similarities and differences between the social justice definitions, answering these three questions. What were the common threads across definitions? What were the differences across definitions? And what are tensions or conflicts between definitions or discourses? After the analysis, I'll present my own ideas around what social justice means to me by answering the following 4 questions. What are my general reflections based on my ethnicity, class, gender, power, and privilege? Number 2, my general working definition or conceptual framework. Number 3, how the definitions of social justice gathered fit or do not fit my own definition. And number 4, what the challenges or tensions are within it. I wrote all of my stuff down, so I am reading it. So if I'm looking over here, that's why I'm going to do my best to try to maintain eye contact. But I get really nervous. So I just wanted to make sure that I have my backup plan. Okay, at the end of my media presentation, I will provide all the resources and credits that I used. Okay, so the first definition comes from Roxana Dion, and she has a master's degree in social work from Arizona State University. She says that social justice is racial equality, distribution of wealth, ensuring that females and males are paid equally, LGBTQ having access to privileges, making sure people have access to healthcare, food, and housing, and making sure that undocumented people have access to resources and are treated humanely. And she gave the example of people being locked up and mass judgments on people without taking their cases into consideration individually. There's no simple definition is what she ended her statement with. She says there's no simple definition. So the way I obtained this definition was actually she called to have an appointment with my son. My son has some special needs, social emotional special needs, and she works for his school. And so she called and was speaking to him, and I'm like, wait, are you a social worker? And she's like, yeah. So I'm just doing the best I can with what I have right now, trying to integrate being a mom and a student. My observations of what her definition was that it was right off the top of her head. She didn't plan it. She was just like, this is what it is. Boom, boom, boom. And then I really love that she did say that there's no simple definition, and I'll explain more of that as we go further into the paper or podcast. And the second definition comes from Savannah Packard, and she is my 11-year-old daughter. Savannah is in 5th grade, and when I asked her what social justice was, her answer was, and I quote, like being around people who serve justice. And when I asked her to maybe give me an example of what social justice was, she stated, if you're around a bunch of people and you see someone in distress and somebody comes in to save the day. The way I obtained this definition was I took a pad of paper and I went into her room and I said, can I ask you a question? And there's no wrong or right answer, just tell me what you think. She said yes, and I asked her if I could write it down. She said yes. My observation of what she said was really deep, actually. First, I was like, wow, wouldn't that be great to have, a child's point of view of what social justice is? Untrained, I didn't prompt her. And then when she said that, I was really proud of her, first of all, for having any idea of what it was, and I think that she did really well. Like people, like being around people who serve justice, like being around good people. That's great. What really got me was that I feel like she associated social justice with a superhero, like somebody that she said comes in and saves the day, which is really interesting because I think that a lot of people have that viewpoint, especially people who haven't studied social justice. And I think that maybe media and the school system probably play a role in that, because that's where she's getting her information, besides me. It made me also more aware that I need to be sharing what I'm learning with my kids, instead of putting the mom hat on and then taking it off and then putting the student hat on. Maybe I should be having that discussion with them more often. The third definition comes from the Charter for Compassion website and the article, The Definition of Social Justice and How to Use This Book. So their social justice is defined as promoting a just society by challenging injustice and valuing diversity. It exists when all people share a common humanity and therefore have a right to equitable treatment, support for their human rights, and a fair allocation of community resources. In conditions of social justice, people are not discriminated against, nor their welfare and well-being constrained or prejudiced on the basis of gender, sexuality, religion, political affiliations, age, race, belief, disability, location, social class, socioeconomic circumstances, or other characteristics of background or group membership. Now, the way I obtained this definition was I just Googled it. I Googled social justice definitions, and then I just started reading until I stopped at something that caught my eye. And the reason that this definition caught my eye was not the definition. It was the institution that gave it. So this definition was cited as Toowoomba Catholic Education, and it was from an EDU website. And so this is from a Catholic school. I realize I have my own biases, and I'm actually judgmental towards Catholic people in reading this definition, because immediately I went to, did they add sexuality in there? Are they going to be prejudiced or biased or discriminate against, people who don't adhere to what their religious beliefs are, which I think that means, you can't be gay or transgender or anything like that, because it might be a sin. So it doesn't seem that way from their definition, which is very interesting to me. And I also know that now that I have that bias, so I need to maybe rethink that myself. So the common threads across definitions are that they are all focused on people, and the intention of the definition seemed to reach for equality and humanity. Even the definition from my 11-year-old daughter, without any prompting, there was an essence of doing what is right, and by right I mean humane and equal. The definition from the academic website spoke of all different populations who have been marginalized and oppressed, and this was similar to what the social worker Roxana conveyed when I asked her what social justice was. Number 2, what were the differences across definitions? So the main difference that I noticed right away was the Savior definition from Savannah. I thought it was quite interesting that she knew to go straight to that Savior sentiment. I realized through this process, and I said this earlier, that I haven't spoken to my children about what social justice means. I think this is a great example of how society and the schools have influenced children to think about justice, along with the influences from the media. Number 3, what are tensions or conflicts between definitions or discourses? So the main conflict I see between the definitions is that Roxana admitted that there is no simple definition of what social justice is, and the Catholic school gave what seemed to be a comprehensive definition. While I respect all 3 definitions, I have to agree that definitions are not simple and that they are just as fluid as the people who give them. I believe that the definitions given by people are based on their experiences, biases, and education, among other contributing factors. So we're moving on to the part where it talks about what my own definitions and stuff are. So here we go. Number 1. What are my general reflections based on my ethnicity, class, gender, power, and privilege? I think it's important to first recognize my position of oppression, power, and privilege. I identify as being a Romani American, but I understand that I do not experience ethnic oppression because my face looks white. In this way, I experience white privilege. I am a person who is experiencing poverty and would be labeled by the state and government as a lower class citizen. Although I understand the economic differential, I do not identify as a poor person. I feel rich because I have what I need and family and friends to support me. I consider myself to have a lot of social capital, and I believe that that is also a privilege. I identify as a woman, which is an oppressed category of individuals, especially when it comes to pay, employment, and gender role work distribution. On the other hand, I identify as a woman, and this is also a position of power in the way that I do not have to endure discrimination like people who may identify as transgender or non-binary. I gotta move over here. Okay. So number 2, my general working definition or conceptual framework. So social justice is, to me, is realizing that there is an inequality. It's drawing attention to that inequality until enough people care and then make changes in order to bring an equitable change to society. Social justice is respecting all living things and realizing that we are all connected and that no one piece is cheated without all other components suffering. It is striving to always do better and be humble and open to realizing when we're not. Social justice involves people, environments, institutions, ideas, biases, policies, resources, and the government. Social justice is freedom and love. Number 3, how the definitions of social justice gathered fit or not fit with my own definition. I believe all of the definitions given within this media presentation fit well with each other and also stand on their own. I do not feel that one is better than the other and that they are all part of a moving component. If social justice was a thing, it would be water. It starts with people, which would be rain, and flows into streams, which would be groups, and moves into institutions like rivers, and eventually lands in the ocean, and the ocean would be the government. The ocean is so big that rivers hardly affect it, but they are constant and ever-flowing, just like social justice. Water is powerful, and life cannot exist without it. This is how I view social justice. What are the challenges or tensions within social justice? So the challenge with social justice is that people who are not experiencing forms of injustice do not believe that there is a problem. When the majority does not realize that there is a problem, they do not know what to do to make a change, so they ignore it, what is not in the forefront of their mind. I know it's cliche, but the old saying, out of sight, out of mind, is really fitting for pointing out this challenge. The tensions within social justice is that the people in power are not using their power to make changes. By the people in power, I mean the president. I mean the presidents. I mean all of the presidents since the beginning of time. I mean politicians, governors, and all white patriarchal institutions that refuse to open their eyes and address humanitarian issues. The white majority and media ran by the white majority is a huge tension that inhibits change. I will leave you with my favorite quote by Albert Einstein. The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. The references that I use for this media presentation are by Roxana Dion, Savannah Packard, Toowoomba Catholic Education, and Albert Einstein.